welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name, as I said, is Youmna el Sayed, and I am an investigative journalist based here in Johannesburg. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here today with you, Youmna, to discuss the realities of reporting on the front lines in Palestine. As Inayat told us, at this stage of this attack on Gaza, last night's numbers were sitting at 40,774 Palestinians killed. Of those people, between 160 and 170 of them are our colleagues, our media colleagues, our fellow journalists. Others have been detained. Almost 100 journalists have been detained. More than 50 are still incarcerated to this day. And all just for dedicating themselves to doing the work of telling the stories of Palestinians to the world. The most recent casualty, the most recent journalist who lost their life was as recently as this Sunday night. So the carnage and the violence is ongoing, and so is the danger. And, you know, I think we live in a very interesting time right now in terms of media, where journalism and media and information and images have never felt so easily accessible, easily distributed. But at the same time, it's more precarious and dangerous than ever, this work. And so it's a strange time of that sort of duality, you know. The attack on Gaza has been called the best documented genocide in history. But at the same time, we all know that it has been vastly underreported, vastly misreported by the global media. And it's because of the work of yourself and your colleagues, and even just civilians in Gaza. If it wasn't for what you were all doing, we would be way more confused and limited in our understanding of the situation. And so we thank you so much for being here, just to clarify. By way of introduction, as we know, Youmna el Sayed is an award-winning journalist and Al Jazeera correspondent who has been living in and reporting from Gaza for the last 10 years. She's also been raising her family there. She's a mother of 4 and a wife. And for the first 3 months of the war on Gaza, Youmna was reporting almost daily on food shortages, water shortages, lack of electricity, the constant bombardment, all while living through those conditions herself. Youmna has since been able to escape to safety and ensure the safety of her family, and then has had to leave them again, I think, to continue traveling the world and keep telling Gaza stories and keep making sure that we don't look away and that we don't forget. And so I just wanted to start by asking you, how are you doing, Youmna? Physically, mentally, emotionally? It's been a few months now since you've been out.
First of all, Zarali, thank you so much for this very wonderful introduction. Your words really touched me. Sometimes it's a reality that you live every single day, but then when you just hear it from others, it has this very different affection on you. I spent 3 months covering this genocide in the Gaza Strip before I was able to evacuate with my family. When I evacuated with my family, I felt like I was a complete image, just an image of a person, honestly. I felt like I lost my soul. I lost literally my soul inside Gaza. I left it and I went out. I went out because this was my only hope, my only option left to save my children. We were already displaced more than 6 times inside Gaza. It was threatened by the Israeli army. We escaped our home under sniper bullets and shelling. These constant terrors and horrors, the lack of drinking water, the lack of food, the starvation, the diseases, everything. It was a balance that you had to choose from. to continue as a journalist, your professional work, your career, or to just focus on the reality of you being a mother and that you have lives you have to do your best to save. And that was why I left the Gaza Strip. Until April, I felt like I was completely in a different world. I felt like I wasn't comprehending what was happening with me. I was in Cairo, but I felt like I could not disconnect myself for 1 minute from the reality of what is happening in Gaza on a daily basis. The news, social media, the calling of the people, trying to communicate with people there. That was my daily routine from day to night. It's not just me, it was me, my husband, and my children. But we had other mental and physical complications, and especially my children, that I had to take care of. I felt that I wasn't really able to do any of these. I felt that the worst thing that I was going through was the survival guilt that was eating me from inside. Why did I survive alone? I left this hell and I came out. It's not just that I'm still surviving and I'm living there. No, I was able to come out, and that was like the best. You were given another chance to live. And then I decided that the only thing that can help me survive this survival guilt that was eating me constantly was that I would continue speaking about Gaza. I continue speaking about this genocide. I continue speaking about Palestine, the people of Palestine from outside Gaza. I told myself, Zanelli, I've been there every single day reporting. Not one day. I did not stop for one day. When you did not see me in front of the cameras, I was there in the field, filming, doing stories about more important things that I couldn't just show the people in front of the camera, telling them the latest updates. They needed to see these bombardments of homes that I'm talking about, how they are, what happened in them, the health system, the injuries of the children, the lack of medication, the lack of food, the lack of water, the lack of energy, how all this is inflicting the people. So I was out there every single day. But all I could see was, I asked myself on a daily basis for 3 months, why is this world abandoning us like that? They don't hear our screams. It's like nobody's watching what is happening to us. This is an unprecedented genocide that is being systematically practiced in the most brutal, horrifying way ever against humanity. And yet the entire world is just watching. I just felt like all these standards, international laws, humanitarian laws, conventions, everything has just fallen apart. It's complete hypocrisy, complete double standardsy. I asked myself these questions every single day and did not have any question. I did not have any answers to these questions. And that's why I decided that I will continue from outside Gaza. I want to go out. When I went to Scandinavia, when I went to the foreign ministry in Sweden, I told them, I am here because I have questions that I need you to answer. When I went to the foreign ministry of Denmark, I asked these questions. I need answers to these questions that so many people, I know that over 2 million people in Gaza wonder about every single day.
Where is the international community?
Where are these humanitarian laws? Where are these international laws, conventions that have been designed and put world in order, to bring justice to the world, The acclaimed democracies that do not exist, the respect to human life, to children rights, to women rights, the freedom of speech, when a complete oppression against and suppression against freedom of speech was practiced by Israel on all international journalists, and no one was able to condemn that.
Can you, for a moment, take us back? You know, October 7th is the big date that we all have in our minds, but that is not the start of the situation. And can you just take us back pre-October 7th? In your work as a journalist, what kind of issues were you covering in Gaza? What was the reality of life there?
So what people don't really realize is that October 7th was the first time that there was a reaction by Hamas or a Palestinian group towards Israel. So the entire world just turned around and reflected on this reaction, but they looked at it as an action, while they did not see that prior to that reaction, there were decades and decades and decades of actions that they completely ignored. They did not even reflect on, they did not highlight, they did not even speak about, they did not even cover with interest. But that reaction was super strong for them that they neglected all the previous actions. And this is the reality. This is the reality of history. It's not just me making up claims or allegations like the Israeli narrative. The Israeli narrative is claims and allegations that have been debunked and debunked over and over again and will continue to be, because they are not based on realities, on evidence, and on facts. They're not based on historical context. Before October 7th, for the past, let me just speak about the past 10 years where I have been working as a journalist. In the past 10 years, I've spoken about an ongoing, lasting Israeli siege for the Gaza Strip that has been ongoing for the past 17 years. I have reported about twice a year, okay, where the Ministry of Health, doctors, nurses in Gaza protested that they need enough medications, medical tools, equipments, X-ray machines to enter the Gaza Strip because of the patients. Where they protested that they needed cancer treatments because we have no cancer hospitals for our cancer patients that die every single day because Israel does not allow them to go to the West Bank for medical treatment and does not allow cancer medications and equipment to enter the Gaza Strip. I have also covered how reconstruction material and a long list of materials, over 200 items of goods are prevented from entering the Gaza Strip because Israel considers them as dual use, which means that they could have a use under military use, but they are also for civil use. But anyway, they're restricted from entering, which made life very difficult for Palestinians in Gaza who needed to reconstruct any destroyed buildings, who needed any kind of materials or goods that you can find in any country of the world, in any place, because Gaza was just basically a besieged territory that everything entering has to be under so many restrictions and measures, and then there could be a chance that it would be allowed, and so many chances that it would not be allowed. I was reporting about the restriction of movement. I entered the Gaza Strip in 2014. I was pregnant with my third child. I was 5 months pregnant, and I was hoping to go back to Cairo to give birth to my child. I was able to come out of Gaza in 2016 for the first time, 2 years later, because of the restriction of movement on people, because Israel besieges the people of Gaza in that 365 kilometers square. Now, the residents of Gaza are over 2.3 million people living in that very small, densely populated area, with a buffer zone all over the borders, taking away from that land. I've reported I've reported about Palestinian citizens like myself not being able to obtain their Palestinian ID for 10 or 15 years because the occupation does not want to give you your Palestinian ID so that the number of Palestinians does not grow. I've reported about Palestinians from the West Bank and from Gaza that are not allowed to cross to their husbands or wife in either of the places. So basically, if you're a Gaza resident, you are in no way allowed to cross to the occupied West Bank, to East Jerusalem, or go anywhere to any of these territories. And also West Bank residents are not allowed to cross into Gaza. So if you're married to a Palestinian from the West Bank, that's it. You need to find another country, a third place, so that you can go to and live together as a family, to be reunited. I reported about these daily oppressions and suppression that has been imposed on Palestinians for years and years. I'm talking about a 17-year-old Israeli siege on Gaza. My eldest child now is 13. She was born into this siege. She hasn't lived anything in her life except a siege. She was born into an open-air prison and came out of an open-air prison. Electricity. Palestinians in Gaza have electricity at best case scenarios, 8 hours a day, because we have a sole power plant that Israel does not allow Palestinians to have more than that power plant, and on certain conditions. Even the generators in that power plant to regenerate or generate electricity to the strip are only allowed to be on certain number so that they can only provide 8 hours of electricity in different parts of the strip. So when the north has electricity, the south doesn't. And then we exchange. And to Israel, it sees that, oh, we've given them 8 hours of electricity. What else do they want? But the entire world is completely silent about all these. Aren't these simple, basic, legitimate rights of any human being in any place? They are. They are.
10 years you've been working to tell the world about these issues that have been ongoing. And of course, there's also been ongoing violence over that time as well, right? Bombardment, shelling, over these years. So you wake up on October 7. When did you realize that this time it was different and worse than anything before?
This was the first time that we call what Hamas did on the 7th of October. I would call it, like in Palestine, in Gaza, they would say like a retaliation, because just before that there was an escalation and an assassination of many of Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters and so on. Before that, we had 2 years before that, there was a major war between Israel and Hamas. And so this was different because it was the first time to see this extent of firing of rockets from the Gaza Strip towards Israel. But it wasn't only that. It wasn't just the amount of rockets that were flying from the Gaza Strip from all directions towards Israeli towns. It was actually the infiltration of the borders. Those are security borders that are under security watch 24 hours a day. If a bird is to stand on that security fence, you would find a military vehicle standing there to see why is this bird standing. Military tanks and vehicles never leave those border areas. And I will tell you this as a resident and as a journalist from the Gaza Strip. The infiltration of the borders, that has been what has happened. Has been, it honestly raises a lot of questions, and I've said this so many times before. There hasn't been one time that these areas were not full of heavy military deployed forces in these areas or all around these border areas. It has never happened before. What happened this time was completely different. Masses of people were able to infiltrate. It happened that the Palestinian fighters infiltrated, and they were surprised that no one came back to fight them back, to the extent that when civilians in Gaza saw that a bulldozer was on the borders, it removed that fence, and people were entering. They started entering like randomly. It was a very random matter, like manner that they very spontaneous manner of the civilians there. People, for the first time in their lives, they've seen that security fence removed. They wanted to enter there. They wanted to see what is behind there. I mean, I've covered the Great March of Return for years in Gaza, and I've seen people and armed civilians and journalists and paramedics being shot 300 meters away from that security fence in a buffer zone that is 300 meters away from that security fence. When they just approached 300 meters away from that security fence, they were shot by sniper bullets. To that extent, Israeli soldiers would not let you approach that fence. So how can it be that there were no forces at all that day, that it took them hours for the first military force, that was a helicopter, that fired and opened random fire on everyone, including the Israeli civilians in that area that's inside the Israeli towns in the south? How is that possible?
And this is what you found out when did you wake up in the morning? Were you aware of what was going on during the nighttime of October 7th?
No, it all happened at 6 a.m. exactly in the morning.
Yeah.
the barrages of rockets were fired at 6 a.m. in the morning. I remember very well that day. I woke up, I thought I was dreaming, and I got up quickly and I just looked out from the window and I found barrages of rockets flying. I quickly went to my children, I checked on them. I met my husband like outside. He had opened the TV. Nobody had anything. Like nobody knew anything. It was a complete surprise. And then I knew there something was going to happen when I saw the first statement of Hamas saying that Mohammed al-Daif, senior Al-Qassam Brigade's leader, is going to be giving an announcement or making a statement shortly. That's when I knew that something really big is happening this time.
How did you make the decision, or when did you make the decision to go into reporter mode? I mean, I'm sure there's a moment of processing, and you're processing and thinking about your family. And then how did you decide, let me go out and report this?
Well, it was just like basically waking up, getting ready to get to the bureau.
No thinking about it, automatic.
You don't really get to the point where it's not like a decision that you're going to make. I was lucky to get to my children's rooms and check on them, kiss them and hug them while they're sleeping, and say goodbye and go.
Right. Wow. Okay. And can you tell us about a typical day of reporting post October 7th? What kind of conditions were you and your colleagues working under? I understand you were internally displaced yourself a number of times. So can you just tell us a bit about that?
Now, as I said, like October 7th was really different because from day one, the attacks and the kind of bombardments were completely different than before. Like we've covered and we've witnessed in previous wars, the targeting of civilian homes and buildings and towers. That wasn't new, but it was mostly, if it's not an assassination, then there is a prior notice. Of course, it's very scary because at the end you have 5 minutes to leave your home, right? So a prior notice isn't like a really like a big thing that you'll be able to pack whatever you need and at least, no, you literally have 5 minutes to run for your life, but at least you have the privilege that you have 5 minutes to take your children and your family and run for your life. But this time it wasn't like that. On the second day, Zanelli, I was reporting. I finished my shift after I had spent like the entire first day. I slept at the bureau. The whole second day I was reporting all day. I wasn't even able to go home for an hour. I hadn't seen my children for 2 days. And then I remember it's like 7 or 8 p.m. And suddenly I read that they hit the telecommunications company. And I was like, what? They hit the telecommunications company? That's just like the like one street before the building of my home. And I was completely terrified. I started following what's going on. And once that area was hit, I wasn't even able to go home because that's on the main street. It's on the main road where you take to take me home. It was just one street away from my building. And then the entire, in just a matter of minutes, the entire neighborhood was under very heavy bombardment. So when the telecommunications company was hit, all the phone signals were completely down. They were barely functioning. So the bombardments were like getting closer and closer. And I wasn't even able to check on my kids. I wasn't able to make sure they're okay, they're alive, nothing has happened to them. And I'm like following with my colleagues and following with the news what's happening. Now you're following the news because you wouldn't know what's happening yourself, and it's just coming closer and closer. Now it's opposite to the building of my home, and I'm right there. I'm held in the bureau by my colleagues, and they're like, Youmna, you can't go there. It's very dangerous. You're gonna get killed, and no one is going to let you go. And I'm like, right there. Can you just imagine these moments? And I'm trying to call my husband, I'm trying to call him, and there's no signal at all. There's no connection. And then I just get one call from him. The the line is breaking, his voice is breaking. He's like, Youmna, don't come here. It's very dangerous. And I can't hear. He's like, we're at the basement. If we get hit, we're at the basement. This is all you think about. You want people to know where you are so that they look for you when you're targeted. So you always have that possibility at the back of your head. And I spent that entire night in another building close to my family home, just watching the sky of the bombardments in my neighborhood.
This targeting of journalists by the IDF, what were the tactics? What did you see that has shown? Because we've heard so many reports of so many journalists that were purposefully targeted. What did that look like for you and your colleagues?
It looked like a direct threat. It looked like a way to shut us, to make us stop working, to make our tasks and our jobs incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Well, prior to the targeting of any journalists, journalist offices or media offices in Gaza were targeted. They were destroyed. Either the entire buildings were completely destroyed or leveled, or using drone missiles, the floor or the office, the media office, was completely destroyed. That's in every single media office in the Gaza Strip, including Al Jazeera's. So when you, as a journalist, all your equipment, all your tools, all your machines, everything is completely destroyed, how would they expect you to work? And then you're also a resident of that place that is under ongoing bombardment. They call you to evacuate with your family. So are you going to leave your family to evacuate to the south while you stay in the north? Are you going to evacuate with your family? And then the entire area, the entire city, the north, was called to evacuate. And like the fact that you want to follow the rules because legally you want to have that legal right that you know for sure inside yourself that it's not going to protect you. It's not going to bring you back, it's not even going to guarantee your safety. Just like wearing your press vest and press gear. You wear them because I got to the point where I was wearing them because legally, I want to say in front of the world that legally I am identified as press. But deep inside, you know that being identified as press is life-threatening to you. It's life-threatening to the people around you, the innocents around you.
I believe you got a phone call that was a direct threat. to
Yes.
say you should leave, or what was the nature of that threat that stuck out to you as something quite different and dangerous?
First of all, as civilians and residents, you don't get a direct call from an officer by a no number or a private number identifying himself as an IDF officer. The call came 2 days exactly after I changed my SIM card. My SIM card was not on my name. It was a SIM card that my producer got me because it was very difficult to reach me on my other SIM card, original SIM card. He actually got me that SIM card quite a couple of days before, earlier than that, but then I only had put it into my phone 2 days before that happened, that phone call. So the phone call came on my husband's phone, and it was a private number. So the officer said, like, the first thing he said is, he identified my husband by his full name. He said, "You are Salahuddin Hamouda Jerwan." And my husband said, "Yes." And he said, "You're speaking to an IDF special officer. We know who you are." This is exactly what he said. "We know who you are. Take your family and leave your home. Otherwise, your lives are in danger." So my husband, he was like, "You know who we are. So you know where we live. So you know that our entire neighborhood is under very heavy bombardment. How do you expect me to take my kids and to the street in this way, in this condition?" And he said, "This is your problem. Deal with it. We have warned you." And then he said this Arabic phrase, which means, "We have warned you." And he said, "قد أعذر من أنذر." It's like this phrase Afakha uses very much, which means that we have warned you and now it's on you. You know, like, you can blame yourself. We've done our part. And he hung up. So, of course, it was a terrifying moment. Not for me as a journalist. It was for me as a parent. Like, that day, you know, like, as a parent, the most thing that you want to do in your life is protect your children. And that day, my 13-year-old, she was only 12 at the time, Aline, she came to me and she was in a very difficult condition. She literally, like, she caught me like this. She screamed at me. She was like, "They're going to kill us because of you. They're going to kill us because of you." She was screaming. She was like, so one of our neighbors was a very small child. She had a very small child, and Aline loved him so much. She was like, "Why would they kill him because of you? Why would they kill Aboud because of you?" And that was like one of the worst moments that I had to live in my life. Because feeling that you're a threat to the most important people in your life, feeling that you're a threat to other innocent civilians who lived with you in that building. We had 6 other families with us. That's not just something that you can overcome easily, Zanelli. It's not something that you can even forget about after that.
You've spoken about feeling abandoned and ignored by the international community. For those of us outside of Gaza, I think this situation has really exposed the fault lines within global media in particular. And I'm curious to hear from you how you feel about belonging to the global media fraternity and what the situation has shown you about how the global media functions and the divisions within it.
Well, unfortunately, you think that we have reached a time that global media has become very professional and exposing to everything that in any part of the world, anything that happens in any part of the world. And the fact that you keep on hearing about the integrity of journalism, the professionalism of journalism, how journalism is not to be politicized, it is not to be according to certain agendas, because it is an authority of itself. It's an authority for justice. It is an authority for the people, regardless of all governments, regardless of other authorities. It is an authority of itself, and it is a huge privilege. Journalism gives you the privilege, the power of being a voice to voiceless people, to inform, to communicate, and to connect this big world together. So you're in South Africa, but you know what's happening in the States, you know what's happening in Gaza, you know what's happening in the Congo, you know what's happening in Sudan. And you are here. This is all thanks to the press, to those people, to those journalists working to inform the people everywhere. So when that concept of journalism completely changes, becomes completely politicized, becomes completely biased. And for so long, I'm one of the people who have heard about the importance of impartial journalism and biased journalism. Journalism being free, like free on itself, a free body on itself from anything else, not attached to anything else, because it's very sacred. That whole image has completely changed for me, honestly. The fact that democracy and freedom of speech and calling out against other countries, third world countries, the Arab world, for their dictatorship against freedom of speech. But then you're practicing the same. You are practicing the same. These international journalism bodies practicing the same against all these rules and regulations that they have lectured about for years.
Yeah. Can you please tell us about some of your colleagues who've lost their lives or who have been injured in Gaza?
So, one of my best friends who has lost his life in Gaza was Samir Abu Daqqa, who's also a Jazeera cameraman. Samir was, despite being a colleague, he was a personal friend to me, a personal friend to my family, to my husband. And he had his entire family in Belgium for the past 6 years. And that summer was the first time that Samir went to see his family. It was the first time that he was able to go see them from 6 years. And he was very happy. And we returned that from our summer vacation. I I went to Lebanon and to Egypt, and then returned to Gaza, and he went to Belgium and returned to Gaza. We returned together on the same day. And we spent all these long hours in the border just trying to cross. And he was telling me about how much happy he is that he was finally able to see them. He felt that his sons and daughter have grown up in these 6 years very much. But in the war, he told me he was very glad that he was able to keep them out of Gaza, to keep them safe. He told me that the first thing that he's going to do when the war ends is he will go to them because he really misses them. So he died with all that, with all that missing in his heart. But Zayn, his other sons and daughter and his wife, they weren't able to even say goodbye to their dad. You know that feeling when you can't even say goodbye to them? You can't touch him, you can't hug him for the last time. They weren't able to do that. Hamza, Wa'il Dahdu, his son. Hamza was like, he was so much younger than me, but he was such an awesome guy. He was like a young brother to me. We joked a lot. Something about this war was that we had no coffee at all. And you know how much coffee is important for journalists when you don't have even the privilege to sleep or rest. And Hamza always used to keep a container of coffee and give me a small amount every time I come from the field. So he would make me a very small cup of coffee. It was like literally this small, but it was a very big thing. It was this very small cup of coffee. It was a very big thing. And it was very precious. And he was that close to me. Yeah. I didn't cry. I didn't cry when Samar was killed. I didn't cry when Hamza was killed. The first time I cried was when I was speaking to Wa'il, and he told me, Youmna, Hamza really loved you. And I just felt how I lost a brother. I lost a younger brother. And that was when I was, for the first time, able to cry.
Did you talk amongst yourselves as journalists and kind of question and second guess and say, you know, guys, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we need to get out. How did you what motivated all of you to keep showing up every day? I mean, I know you said on the first day it wasn't a question. You were up, you were dressed, you were out. But what kept you going once you realized what danger you were all in?
The abundance of the world. That feeling of abundance from the world. That bitter feeling when you look at yourself and you say, why has this world abandoned us like that? Why are we not on the news day and night? Why aren't our children that are being killed, that are being injured, that are being deprived of medical treatment, that are being deprived of food and water? Why is the world silent about all these war crimes? Why aren't they fighting to enter the Gaza Strip, to see for their own eyes, to cover like us? That taste of abundance by the world, for me as Youmna, was an enough motivation to keep going. And I know that for so many other colleagues, it is that motivation. Because honestly, under the conditions that we are working, or we were working, and they are still working on every single day, there's no professional duty that will keep you rolling and bearing all these struggles and all this pain every single day, except if you have a stronger motivation, a responsibility within you that I will keep going because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of innocents who depend on me.
Thank you so much, Youmna, for giving us a picture of what those 3 months look like and what almost 11 months have been like since. We appreciate you opening up and taking yourself back there mentally and emotionally. I'd like to now open up the floor for questions from our colleagues in attendance. Here's the microphone, and if anyone would like to ask a question, please just introduce yourself and go ahead.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakallah khairan for the deep analysis that you have provided this morning. It gives us a good understanding of what is happening on the ground, and more importantly, understanding the issues that are not being reported on. From your perspective, what do you feel are some of the most underreported aspects of the genocide that you feel requires more coverage in the media space? Jazakallah.
I think that there are a lot and many reports that have spoken about the humanitarian conditions in general in Gaza. But I think, and I really believe that these humanitarian conditions are way more complicated than what people watch on their screens, whether on TV or on social media. Because you just watch this for a couple of minutes, seconds, but you don't live that. You don't live the fact that there's no water. You don't have water, whether it's clean water to use or drinking water. That's a major struggle. That's an unbearable struggle. You can't bear the pain you feel as a human being when you know that you're thirsty, your veins are dry, and you don't have enough water to drink. And even the food, the fact that children, to reach the amount or to the extent or the level that they would start dying of malnutrition, people don't ask themselves how they feel because they don't see those. You don't have a camera rolling on that child for hours, hearing his cries to his mom of the pain of being hungry and not having anything to eat, especially like what's happening in the north. The fact that the north is under systematic starvation like that, in that way, in this manner that it is, and this world is completely watching this as something that they speak about in their bulletins, and it just passes. It's way more complicated than that. It's way more complicated than that. And it needs true, rapid action. Because these details are the details that people don't see and don't feel, no matter how much you watch every single day about Gaza. You are not going to see that unless you have lived it, unless you have seen someone who's living it and you have experienced it with him. So yes, these are very important issues that should not just pass like that on as headlines or as videos simply in any bulletin that we should speak about a number of children that have died from malnutrition. No, this is a very big and complicated issue that needs more attention and rapid response. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me clearly. My name is Ashraf Garda, talk show host, SFM Radio, and head of the South Africa project. You spoke about something that's really important. You said, you know, the media role is the voice of the voiceless, right? So give me a sense, has the, you know, up to now, historically, it's like the media asks questions and you speak to decision makers and you speak to activists and you amplify that what they say. Have we or should we see a shift in the role of media practitioners where they're not just reflecting the voice of the voiceless, but they are activists in their own right, therefore not being objective in the traditional sense, but understanding the cause and therefore amplifying the cause in the first person?
In a situation like Gaza's situation, thank you, Ashraf, for your question. In a situation like Gaza's situation now, and an unprecedented genocide that is going on in Gaza in history now, your role as a journalist, being a voice for the voiceless, is to amplify. It's not just to speak to decision makers and those governmental officials. It's speaking to the people who endure these daily sufferings. Connect them to other people in the world. Show their suffering to other people of the world. Because if these government officials don't give a shit, they don't care about these people like we see now, then the people of the world should be able to support other people like them. And this is where the media has failed the people of Gaza. They have failed to show, to amplify, to reach the voices of people of Gaza and connect them to other people in different areas of this world. And the support, the popular support that we see now among the people of the world in different areas, it has come after many months have passed. A lot of torture, too many people being killed, and a lot of challenges and catastrophic situations that the Palestinians have lived. They hear them out now because they have started searching for other journalists and other voices. They have started searching for the voices of these Palestinian people from inside Gaza. But it has taken them a very long time to be heard. Because people of South Africa, for example, they don't know Youmna el Sayed. So they're not going to go and look for me to know what is happening in Gaza. But they know who Ashraf is, who is a South African journalist and has an audience and people know by name. So when you come out, Ashraf, reporting about the genocide in Gaza and about what's happening to the people in Gaza, that reach will be so much faster and easier. And that popular support will be so much faster than it has taken to reach. And now my role as a journalist who has become a survivor, all these conferences and meetings and media engagements that I am engaged in, it's because I want the people to hear about what's happening in Gaza, that they haven't been able to enter Gaza and see for their own eyes. You, as a journalist, with other journalists, have been deprived of that legitimate right to cover what is happening inside Gaza. So I have come out to speak to you. I'm not on Al Jazeera now. I'm not covering from my channel. I'm not working at professional work. I am Youmna el Sayed, the journalist, the survivor from Gaza, who I chose to continue in that role because I have that privilege. I have a privilege that I am able to reach more people than hundreds of thousands others who are living in Gaza that are not heard and that need to be heard by other people. Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you.
I think you've touched a lot on what I wanted to ask, specifically as our role as journalists and our responsibility. You spoke around being abandoned by the international community, both in the media fraternity, but also just as, world leaders. Our responsibility as journalists, as we've mentioned already, has been, we've let down the Palestinian cause to an extent. What is now going forward, some of the collaboration, some of the work that we need to do, not just to amplify voices in the way that you've mentioned, but also systematic changes within newsrooms. What we find is that because journalists aren't allowed into the Gaza Strip to report themselves, we rely on the same international media that is seen to be biased, seen to be creating their own narrative, to rely to tell the same stories, even when newsrooms have their own policies in place. We're still perpetuating the same stereotypes, the same biasness. So how do we change from a level of on the ground to management, to the way that we report on stuff in languages and in a way that makes the story told in the most ethical, equitable manner? I think that's where we are right now, having a struggle. Just calling it a genocide right now is still something we're having arguments around. It's so political just on what we name what's happening. So where do we go from here going forward, that it doesn't take 11 months for people to find the story, but also looking at how we get the news from social media with shadow bans and different accounts being changed. How do we shift going forward and ensure that we're getting the right stories out there?
Thank you. So you mentioned that it's an unbreakable circle, as I see it, a cycle that you take, newsrooms now take whatever information they need from other news agencies, right? But there are international news agencies that are inside Gaza that take their news from credible sources from inside Gaza. And I think that this is, as a journalist, you are a networker. This is what you do. This is what we do. We have networks everywhere. As an international journalist, when you enter the Gaza Strip or anywhere else in the world, you have come to cover this region. You're not just going to enter on your own and do your story and come out like that. You will need a Palestinian fixer to take you to places. You will need a Palestinian producer to help you in those interviews. You will need a Palestinian translator because of the language barrier. You will need to speak to Palestinian residents and Palestinian officials to put together your story. These are rules of any news story in any place of the world. And at the end, you write your name on that story, you report that story. But was it done only by you? It was a teamwork. 5 members of that team are Palestinians, and 1 member is a foreign member. But how you look at it is that now it's a credible story because the name, the label, is a foreign name. And that's not journalism. That is not called journalism. That is not how we practice journalism. And why Al Jazeera is very high and very professional in its coverage is because it depends on Palestinian journalists, Palestinian correspondents. From day one, you teach a journalist the rules and regulations of impartial and biased journalism, but you do not say whether he's credible or not according to his nationality. That is not journalism. So this is what newsrooms should start doing now. This is what they have or were supposed to be doing from day one. They were supposed to depend on credible journalists from that same place to cover those stories. Thank you.
My name is Hassan Lorgat, and I'm basically here to thank you for the work that you and others have been doing. I work as a media activist for civil society, but I'm active also with Palestine Solidarity Alliance and the BDS movement. So some of my comments really here about what we've told other people in the International Anti-Apartheid Conference is that it is our task here to work out who in our country perpetuates and sustains Zionism. Often I find activists are happy to share, as they must, a person died. But we ignore that there are groups in this country that have as part of their founding mandate that they look after the image of Israel in our country. So I think that given that we've got a very strong Zionist lobby, I think our media has to talk about how they sustain it, how they sustain Zionism in this country. But often this doesn't get done. It's easier to get a speaker from there because we have one of the strongest Zionist lobbyists in this country, following the USA. Then I just want to also just come back that, so in thanking you, there was a meeting in the end of January, a bit of a protest meeting, 28th of January, where some journalists met at Mary Fitzgerald Square. I think I pointed out there that it was 100 days too late. So clearly, our movements are quite weak. There's no real active journalist syndicate here. Of course, there's an editors forum, but the union of journalists that is not there. So I really think that in thanking you, we must also recognize that we have to reorganize ourselves at home so that we can become stronger to help and be in solidarity with you and others who need us.
Thank you so much, Hassan. And I think it's a very special responsibility on every single individual in this world, whether you're a teacher, you're a journalist, you're a doctor, you're a professor, you're just a housewife. You need to be able to stand out for humanity, because how I see it is that the cause of Palestine, it's really a cause of humanity. We're talking about legitimate, basic human rights. Human rights. They are called human rights because they should be accessible for every single human, regardless of your race, your faith, your nationality. They are human rights, and they are the rights of human Palestinians as well. Yes, please.
Here. I think somehow media are one of the key figures in South Africa that is keeping the story of Palestine alive. We have pledged to that and we will continue to do that. But just a few comments I'd like to raise. Hassan spoke about the media. Sadly, the media is captured, not only in South Africa, but in the Western world as well. Then the issue around almost 200 journalists that have been killed in Palestine. My worry is, how do we get the narrative, the correct stories out into the West, the global society? Because it seems as if they have decided to turn a blind eye to the situation being perpetrated in Palestine, the genocide. It suits the Western world for what is going down. It suits the Western world to have captured the media as well, sadly. How do we get those stories out? How many journalists are still brave enough to report from Palestine? Because we need those stories to continue being told. What I also worry about is media exhaustion, people that will get tired of hearing the stories of Palestine. So, having been in the situation, please tell us how we continue keeping that story alive.
That's why I was saying that it's very important, because people feel sometimes numbed of all the scenes they continue to see every day on their screens, whether it's your TV or your mobile. And that's very important. That's why I was saying that it's a responsibility of every single individual in every society in this world to continue educating people around them, to educate their children, to educate their co-workers, their colleagues, to speak about this. You know, as long as you know that there is an injustice ongoing, then you need to continue to speak about it. That's a responsibility, a human responsibility that you owe to yourself and to your community, and then to those other human beings in those areas. So if you do not have that sense of responsibility, then it's going to be, if you don't have that sense that this could happen to you, you could be next, you won't have that motivation to keep going on.
You're out of Palestine now and you're traveling widely. How do you feel and how do you respond to the false narrative of Palestinian story?
I tell them that their lies, they are not based on facts or evidence. I tell them that they are biased to Israeli narratives, and I tell them that they are completely unethical and completely defy the integrity of journalism, that it should be based on true facts and evidence and biased. And I say it very much that Palestinians don't need to lie on their narrative, because the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian cause, the entire cause is justice enough. It's justice enough if you compare it to laws, international laws, humanitarian laws, conventions. It is justice enough. It speaks for itself. You don't need to make up events to, like stand out or stand with the cause. It is justice enough. but not being able to practice the same towards the Israeli narrative, that is being biased. When you speak about hate speeches and call them out and highlight them when they're spoken by Palestinian officials, and when you hear them from Israeli officials, and you completely turn a deaf ear to them, like they never happened, like they've never been said, proudly over and over and over, then I think the people now around the world are getting they're realizing very much the reality of what is happening, of how international journalism organizations are covering these stories, and who is biased and who is not. I think there is a huge awareness that has spread against the people who go out to the streets every day and protest in different areas of the world.
Hi, Youmna. I am Victoria Hill from Vetsvuzela. And I just wondered, what advice can you give to young journalists going into the field who are committed to it, but are now scared for their lives because of what they've seen, and also scared of the lack of freedom of speech they have?
So every time I spoke to younger journalists, the most important advice for me to tell them was, be your true self. Speak the reality. Speak the truth. Because everyone out there that is listening to you or watching you, if they find out that you are lying, they're going to lose that trust they have put in you. And once an audience says, oh, he lied or she lied about this, they will never trust you again. And the people are more important than any other organization that you would abide to and or give misinformation or disinformation. These people listening to you are more important than any of these organizations. So I think that to be a trustworthy journalist, to present true evidence and facts and not just say stories, this is what makes you a real journalist. Because we have a lot of social media people. They're there and they're brilliant in saying stories and telling you about what's happening. But there's this thin line that differentiates between a social media person, influencer, and a journalist. You are a journalist, you should be credible. When you tell me a story and I ask you, you should be able to present true evidence and facts, credible numbers, pictures, whatever that you have that is true evidence to back up your story. If you do not have that evidence, do not tell me the story.
Assalamu alaikum, Youmna. Lots that you're sharing with us resonates, and it makes us feel as though we are part of what's taking place. So regarding the media narrative, we know this is the latest brutal genocide in a series of genocides that are taking place. And up until this year, the mainstream media has had control of this, and that's why we've only seen the Zionist narrative take place. This time around, however, because of Besan, Motaz, and everybody else, all the youth on the street who've picked up their phones and become ad hoc journalists overnight, the world has seen the brutality on the streets. What are your thoughts on the role of social media, which has different challenges, and how can we, around the world, make use of this space to amplify the voices and the situation of what's taking place in Palestine?
Now, of course, social media is a very, very wide and vast world when it comes to information in general. And it can be a double-headed spear when it comes to good information and false information. It can be a way to rapidly communicate and rapidly inform other nations around the world, but it can also be a way to completely destroy a certain image because of how it is, or this subject or scenes are being circulated or posted. So I think it's very important that the higher organizations, the organizations that have more authority, the websites and organizations that work to very much, verify the correct information from the information. All these organizations have a lot of responsibility towards social media, because yes, I have myself witnessed a lot of censorship on social media, which social media was a very important tool for me at the beginning of the war, where I could completely, very quickly engage with my audience worldwide and show them what I see on the spot from where I am, speak to them in a very easier way, not just through the camera of the TV. And it just makes it a very natural relationship and very close between you and your followers on different social media platforms. But the censorship, for example, that is being practiced on voices, this is a major problem, a very frustrating problem for journalists, for voices that depend on social media platforms to inform people around the world. But also the amount of misinformation and disinformation that we see on social media platforms, that is just catastrophic sometimes, because we know how much harm it can cause. So we need more work on the verifying of these kinds of news, of these people that are using social media platforms to spread out stories about a certain society or events that are unfolding.
Thanks. So sorry, I came back.
Yes.
Just responding to Comrade Julie Ali here, who's interviewed many of us many times. I think that if you compare from the last question, I think social media has shifted the balance. TikTok and others are being banned in the US, not because it's Chinese owned, because it gave the alternative stories. And of course, it's got a lot of nonsense in that. We've got to do, as they say in the past, do a lot of crap detecting, to work it out. But Julie's point is worthwhile because it coincides with the view of Ignacio Ramonet, who used to work as a journalist. He did stories on Fidel Castro and others. He basically said that the fourth estate has been captured, right? And that he was asking for this kind of alliance between academics, as you suggest, journalists, activists, and others, because, and he was asking for a fifth estate, because the dominant forces are really, if you look at the ownership powers in the world, they are really trapped.
Yes.
Even our public broadcaster, we have to fight so hard, and Ashraf and others do a sterling job. And I really don't say it because he's present. I must say, I'm active in a number of these spaces, but the public broadcaster has been quite consistent. But many do not know the background fights we have to have with the board. I
Sure.
mean, even in this year, we have kind of approached the board threatening that they have not covered the fair stories. Some in the mainstream media, ENCA, this story doesn't seem to have existed. For them, there's no genocide going on, simply by the lack of coverage. And the power of mainstream media is so important. And this is where I come back to you, because they have the resources to tell the truth, right? They have the resources to do a lot more fact checking. But they decided up front not to cover it, you know?
So unfortunately, it's the last question. Ashraf, I'll give it to you now.
Must I ask it now? Okay, fine. All right. So maybe just a two, since the last question is like a double question, right? So in terms of yourself personally, when you're the journalist working for Al Jazeera or whoever, whether you're reporting or whether you're in studio, that's one person. When you publish on social media from your own account, right? How then do you navigate the two? Meaning, are you in essence two different people or not? And I'll say this because often media houses would regulate you as well in your own spaces. But if I look at myself personally, on social media, by and large, I can say what I want and speak to who I want and talk about what I want. That may not apply to the newsroom. So that's the one thing about how you navigate the two, and is the personality very different, right? And maybe the second one is linked to that. You know, all of us, whether we are reporters or whether we radio or TV anchors, we often pitch stories, and you know, there's a production team and there's an editor that decides whether it should go to air or not, right? And often it doesn't go to air for whatever many reasons, right? And when you know that it has to go on air because of whatever, how then do you navigate that on a personal level where there are continuous gatekeepers? They're like, okay, this is nice, but that's more important. And the story then gets put in the shelf.
Okay, thank you for your questions. So the first question, you asked about me personally as Youmna. When I am Al Jazeera English correspondent in the Gaza Strip, I'm Youmna el Sayed. I'm standing in front of that camera. I do not speak my opinions. I speak facts and realities of what I see with my own eyes, what I research, what I gather evidence and facts to prove what I am saying. I report to inform. I keep Youmna, the person, completely away from that camera. I speak only what I see with my eyes on the ground. Social media platforms, as a person, I might be considered somehow as a public person or public, I'm not going to say public figure, just a public, a known person, okay? But social media platforms are usually where you can express yourself also as a person. So I use my social media platforms to express myself, my views, my ideas as Youmna the person. Youmna the person does not, it does not completely, okay, I'm still a journalist. I'm Youmna the person, but my background is a journalist. It does not contradict with who my, or what my profession is. My profession is a journalist. I am a very well experienced, politically experienced person on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict for so long. I know things that maybe other people in different professions or in different areas would not know about. I express myself on the issues that happen in front of me as Youmna, the person who is also a journalist, but not a correspondent for a certain channel or a place of work. So that's regarding the first question, because again, I said social media is a way that can help you to speak to people in different places of the world as yourself and speak about what you want to tell them, and also speak about your own views and opinions, right? The second,
before we move to the second part, it's so linked to this one. So on that part there, I get what you're saying. I probably do the same thing, right? But the reality is that even as an individual, you are very much defined by who you work for. And you were not at Jazeera, we know who you work. You get my point. The link is obvious. So even if you then publish on social media in your own image, in your own voice, right? Are there restrictions between yourself and, for example, Al Jazeera? Because the truth is, in many ways, you are an ambassador of that channel.
well, social media platforms are solely your own business as an individual. I know my boundaries as a person, as a journalist, as a professional journalist. And I do not cross. So this has never happened before, where I was asked not to post something or to remove a certain post or something. As long as you know your boundaries as a person, as a professional, I don't want just to say as a journalist, you could be anything, and you preserve those boundaries, then you're in the safe side. But no, Al Jazeera does not contradict with anything that you post, as long as it is within the borders that you have for yourself as a person. So yeah, that's how it is. The second question was about social media.
No, it was about.
Yes, the gatekeeper. Yes. Yes. So again, the gatekeepers and the amount of restrictions that we have witnessed, especially during this past year, since the beginning of the Palestinian or the Gaza genocide. I think this is where, when you really know that this story must be exposed, it must be highlighted, it must be known, this is where you can use that sphere of social media. Because that is one of the most important and best advantages of social media. There are so many stories that maybe I wanted to cover, but editorially, it was not the time for it. It was not suitable. Maybe it was covered, but it was never broadcast. It was not there on air. It was not the right time. There could be so many reasons. At the end, you're a journalist, you're working according to some certain terms and conditions that you need to abide to. But when you really feel as a person and as a journalist, regardless of the place that you work at, that this really needs to be exposed and people need to know about, this is where you can use those social media platforms as a weapon to expose those stories. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you all for your questions. I think the conversation came to a place that I've been grappling with my entire journalism career as well, which is this thing of objectivity and media ethics, and how much of it relies on this idea that the journalist is an other, is an outsider from the situation, right? And I think seeing the reporting out of Palestine has kind of reminded us what the core of journalism is, which is people telling their own stories, talking about their own communities, and you know, how that kind of challenges the boundaries around media ethics. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Youmna. We really appreciate you being so open and engaging with all of us.